Story begins with the fact that many people have gathered who want the same thing. Each of them wanted to burn the witch. So many people screamed in the crowd and asked that this dirty witch be destroyed. Well, why did they achieve this? The fact was that because of her, according to them, all the stables burned down, and now they cannot survive without them. They tied her hands and demanded that she be burnt as soon as possible. But one girl felt very sorry for the witch, and she demanded to untie her immediately, and tried to convince that she did not do anything wrong to anyone. But what then happened? Her name was Circinia. She used to be an ordinary simpleton, who accidentally became the bride of the heir. But one day she woke up in the body of Circinia, the very villainess of this story, who was the sorceress of the Belfar Empire. She could control the power of fire. Because of this, she could gain and release heat easily. Therefore, she was invincible, and no one in the Empire could defeat her. On top of everything she did wrong, she also bullied the main character's mother. Also, she managed to burn half of the Empire. Then she tried to steal and destroy the heir. However, the prince managed to prevent this and survive. But for her, this was unacceptable, and due to the fact that she could no longer resist her nature, a terrible end awaited her. 15 arrows pierced her body, and then, in front of many people, they did to her what they saw fit, brutally dealt with. It was done to show the power of the heir, and after that everyone except the witch was happy. And since that girl was in the body of a witch, she was initially frightened when she found out that she had become her, but then she realized that this was her destiny. For better or worse, she took over her body 3 years before, and she wondered if she could change her fate. What if she lay low and stopped the crime, maybe she could save her head? That was the first thing she thought of. She hasn't completely settled in the witch's body yet. She was very afraid of fire, and wanted when everyone started to kindle a fire, pour a little oil to escape without much noise. Looking at the ashes, people will think that she just burned to the ground. They already prepared her for her execution. Everyone was looking forward to this moment. They demanded to immediately light a fire, but only one girl could not look at it. They tried to hold her harder to make sure she couldn't get out, but the witch only heard how the girl asked to be released. Then something unexpected happened. Someone came for her. But who was it, and why did he need it? It was some guy she didn't know. She didn't understand what was going on. It was very unexpected and incomprehensible for her. It turned out that his goal was to free Circinia. But she couldn't believe what he told her because it's impossible. But something confused him. Something had to be done. He asked her to show him her hand, and said something needs to be done. But she didn't understand what he was doing. It turned out that he wanted to free his hand, but that strange man turned out to be familiar enough to her, and she could not push him away. She felt that she was familiar even with his smell. But with every second she understood more and more who it was, and could not believe it. But until the last she read that this could not be, they seemed to her not at all like Ben what? He addressed her by name, saying that he was very bored all this time. Next, it was where they usually play games of chance. She could not stop. She chose numbers, and the next number was 16. She bet all her chips. She looked very confident. It was clear that she knew what she was doing. At least it seemed that way from the outside. People around admired how she manages to play the game so effectively and competently. Everyone wanted to know how she managed to win twice in a row. They wondered if she feels rich with so many chips. She was proud that everything belongs to her, and thought about whether it would be time to quit with this. She began to understand why people are so addicted to gambling. With every minute of being there, she already completely goes to the roof. How she hoped that she would win this time too. Because she put on the line everything she had. 16! The ball fell into cell 16! Incredible. She felt supported because the people standing behind her were rooting for her. But even they did not understand how she manages to win for the 3rd time in a row. Of course, everyone congratulated her. She was proud of herself, and she was pleased that she turned out to be a good player. She couldn't even imagine how much it all costs. She could not get enough of that, finally managed to get rid of the life of an evil witch. Along with this, she got rid of her former goals and glorified her name. When it entered Circinia's body, it was 10. She was just reading a book and suddenly fell asleep and woke up as a character in the book. She immediately noticed her reflection in the mirror and was very frightened and surprised. She never thought something like this could happen to her. Circinia has fiery red hair, so she was considered a very beautiful girl. But despite the fact that she is very beautiful, she has an incredibly terrible and fiery power. Cold-blooded, not afraid of fire, the embodiment of anger, but she also had another side. She lived all her life alone. Everyone wished her harm. She could not accept it when she read a book. And at some point she thought that her end had come, from which she almost went crazy. It's been 4 years since this story started. Her magic is told in the middle of the book. And until that moment, no one will know she's actually a witch. Sudden changes, it's kind of like God's will. And suddenly she decided to live only for herself and enjoy life with the money that she won. If she had been rich, she could have avoided the original ending and would have lived a good life, which she really wanted. Now everything will definitely change for the better. But then something unpleasant enough for her happened. It turned out that there was no more money. Some man began to apologize, said that he was very sorry. He explains to her that there is not enough money and nothing can be done about it. Then he offered to wait for the count so that she could then ask him everything that interested her. He tries to calm her down as he understands how unpleasant it is to hear such. She tries to make him understand that it is better for him to exchange it all for money and return everything that she won to her. But she tries to restrain herself so as not to do stupid things. But she didn't succeed. She's very furious, demanding everything she won because she spent all her money on it, and without it she won't leave. But still he's trying to say that he'll have to wait a couple of days. But she doesn't have any patience anymore. He asked to wait because it wouldn't work out any other way. With every word he said, she got more and more aggressive. She could no longer restrain herself because she already imagined what she would spend all the money on, and she does not want to hear any refusal. With her rage, she frightened that man very much and began to threaten him. Although he had already explained that nothing depended on him, it took time. He asks him to understand and tries to prove that it will take time to transfer the money. She thinks this is all a complete lie. Since she already understood that she would be able to receive the money after a while, she thought, how should she proceed? At this time, he sees that she is already angry enough and decided to compromise because he no longer knew how to calm her down. He did his best to calm her down and offered a guarantee. She immediately thought about it, because for her it was a good option. He realized that she could agree to these conditions, so it became a little easier for him. Well, one of them had very good guarantees. She eagerly wanted to know what kind of guarantees that man said. Then he began to escort her to some room. But she did not yet know what he was up to, because he did not explain anything in detail. They approach that place and he shows her who was in this room. There was some guy who had a chain on his leg. They held him hostage. But it is not yet clear why they are keeping him there, because this guy looked absolutely helpless, and how this could be related to guarantees. After she saw him, she was in shock. She really did not like the fact that they keep this man as a slave because he is just a child. It pissed her off. She thought it was some kind of joke, because how can you take a child as collateral? In addition, that man says that this is quite normal, because he is a slave, and such is his fate. Of course, this made her very angry, because she does not understand how it is possible to infringe on the rights of people, and even more so to keep them as a slave. But at this time, the man is trying to say that this ladder was bought for a lot of money. This angered her even more, because he said that the Count had no money. Where did they get it from him to buy a slave? And then he realized that in vain he proposed such an option. He immediately started apologizing because he knew what she could do when she got angry. She feels that when she is angry, for some reason everything inside her body begins to boil, and it is incredibly hot in her head, so as not to set everything on fire. She realized that in this situation you need to act more calmly. You need to decide how to act in this situation. That man is trying in every possible way to calm her down and wants to offer to accept these guarantees, after which she will definitely be paid. But she looked at this guy who is attached, and she did not know how best to act because she was very sorry for him, and she did not understand how he deserved such an attitude. And at some point she heard that guy start to quietly ask for help, after which she had to concentrate to understand the situation. She wants to think as rationally as possible. She understands that if she gets angry, then I will not pay the money, and besides, people can suffer. She looked at the guy and noticed that he was covered in bruises and also very thin. It looked terrible. It was hard to imagine how many days he had not eaten, But still she couldn't afford to leave him here. He saw that she was going to do something, but he hoped that she would release him. She began to come closer to him, but he was so scared that he was even afraid of her. And of course I saw it, and it was not clear whether he was cowardly and out of fear or hunger. But still she freed him and gave him freedom. She tried to show him she wouldn't hurt him and could be trusted. For some time he could not realize that he was now free. And the fact that he will no longer have to be in this dark and cold room without food and normal human conditions. She looked at him with kind eyes and felt that she did something good. She saved a man, and she felt how grateful that guy was to her, although he did not say a word to her. He touched her with his hand, and at that time he enjoyed the fact that he was finally free. Next to her he feels safe, but he still did not know who this girl was and why she released him. She told that man that she would take the guy as collateral and asked him to pass this information on to the chief, and made it clear that if she was not paid within a week, they would regret it very much. From now on, the fun begins. She brought that guy to her house. But it was not in the best condition. There were even small mice in it. Everything was around in a web and without a good repair, as she had long wanted to renovate the house, and with the money received, it could just be done. But plans have changed a bit. She brought this child as collateral because she couldn't watch him tormented by them there in a dark room with no food or light. She understood that he had been through a lot. He had a lot of scars on his body. He needed help. She told him that she would definitely deal with it, and would do everything in her power. She would cure him. But he said that he felt fine, and that everything was in order. But she decided not to listen to him, because she saw everything with her eyes. Then she called him to her. But he was in no hurry to approach her, to which she said about once, 2, 3, and with the power of thought she made him rise into the air and pulled him to her. And then she promised him that soon everything should pass. Then he asked what was her name, because he doesn't know anything about her. She told him what her name is. Her name is Circinia. He had never heard such a name before. After that she asked him his name. But he was silent. He could not say anything for a few seconds, and so she realized that something was wrong here. She asked why he didn't say anything. Maybe something was wrong, but he replied that he didn't have a name. She didn't expect that, and I didn't know how it happened. After that, she wondered how old he was, because she wanted to know at least some information about him. He had an answer to this question. He said that he was 19 years old, although she thought he was much younger. She thought he looked like a schoolboy, and could not believe that he was only a year younger than her. She suggested that maybe it was because he was too skinny. Then she asked us if he was hungry, but he said that I was hungry. It's all right. Though quite a bit hungry. She realized that he didn't want to seem too arrogant, but she was pleased to take care of him. After that, she went to heat up his food. She remembered that she had soup, and I told him to eat it all to the end because it might go bad. Of course, he did not refuse because he had not eaten a normal meal for a long time. She caught herself thinking she was using magic in front of someone. But then she realized that he was just a pledge, so she definitely won't tell anyone. She started using magic, but didn't think he could see everything. And yet he saw everything. It shocked him enough, and he asked, "Is she a witch?" To which she calmly replied that this is so. She is the only one who can control the fire, and he should not worry. Therefore, it would be better if he did not tell anyone about this, to which he agreed and promised that he would not tell anyone. After they talked a little, he felt better and started to trust her a little. He no longer feels any danger. And asked her if she was bored living alone in this house. To which she said that she was already used to it, and it's normal for her. After that, another 10 days passed, but she still lives in that house with that guy, and nothing has changed in it. She thought that it would be better not to become attached to him, because in a week, he would not be with her. But she thought about giving him some name for a while. But she didn't know how to tell him about it and offer, because she didn't know how he would react to this. Well, after all, she decided to start this conversation and suggested the name Ben to him. He was very surprised because he never thought what name he might like or suit, and at first he did not answer her. So she thought that he didn't like the name, so she decided to ask, but he said that he really liked the name. Since then she called him Ben. It took him a long time to get used to it. And over time he got used to his name being Ben. Further, the story continued with the fact that in the Empire, it was allowed to build gaming houses. And once the Count lost the palace in the casino, it took him a lot of time and money. In order to still get the recognition of the Emperor, in order to get support, the Count gave most of the money to the nobility, and in the end, it turned out that he ended up in big debts. After a whole year has passed, he still managed to redeem the palace. Now he is engaged in repaying debts from the money that the casino brings him. And since people always want to win the jackpot and they really like to spend money, they gamble very often. But what is the probability that the jackpot will fall out? The secret is that it was all designed so that the game could benefit from it. She tried to enjoy a rich life and money as much as possible, but the girl turned out to be incredible, because she managed to hit the jackpot 3 times in a row. Because of her, the Count's dream failed. And if it happens so that he gives her the money, then he will say goodbye to everything that he has. And when she came for her money, he just used that guy as a defense. But something happened that they could not foresee. She then took him with her, and everything did not go according to plan. Started yelling at the guy because he made such a terrible mistake. He did not understand why he did this, and how he could allow this. He began to tell him that he was not to blame for anything, that the woman who came for her money was to blame for everything. But the Count did not believe in it. He did not understand how he could not deal with this woman, and for some reason made such a mistake and allowed her to do whatever she wanted. He tried to prove she was just crazy, and he was powerless against her. He told him how she broke the table with one hand and used some strange ability. But his boss did not understand what he was talking about and asked what other abilities. He began to explain to him that some kind of gust of wind raised her hair, and this gust of wind was somehow similar to fire, and he almost burned himself. He's not stupid at all, and he couldn't come up with such nonsense. He struggled to get his boss to believe him. Then that boss asked where their slave. He did not know how to correctly say that the slave was issued as a guarantee. This made the boss very angry, and his subordinates understood this very well and did not know how to apologize to him. Then the chief began to tell why that slave was so important. Because his finances are limited, especially compared to the richest man in the empire. He took out a debt from him to cover all his losses. But fortunately the Earl likes to see handsome men around, so he bought that slave. He seemed very handsome to him. He listened for a very long time about what mistake he made. His master ordered the slave to be returned as soon as possible, and he obeyed him and ran to carry out the order. He was going to meet him in a week. Then he began to think about what he should do better, and realized that he would not be able to pay with money now. Therefore, you need to take the slave without additional conditions. This was the only way out. At this time, Ben was at the girl's house. He was still eating the soup she made for him and enjoying delicious homemade food. She continued to find out some information about him because she knows absolutely nothing about him, and he remembers little about himself. The first thing she wondered was how much he was telling the truth. It seemed to her that he had not eaten enough, and offered another bowl of soup, and for a minute it seemed to her that he did not like her food. After which she asked him to finish everything that she poured for him, because the food could all go bad. But due to the fact that he was used to being a slave, and the fact that he was treated very badly, he began to be afraid of what to say or ask, even if it is very necessary. After that, he said that he had already eaten enough. She noticed that he had eaten everything she gave him to me and would have to throw out the rest of the food, then offered him something else to eat, to which he agreed and tried this delicious food. He liked it very much. It was the 3rd day when he was at her house, and at some point he broke her plate. But she got used to it. He broke about 5 plates, but he didn't do it on purpose and apologized for it. But she didn't get angry at all. She just silently removed the shards. At this time, he offered his help, since it was because of him that the plate broke, and she should not clean up after him. She did not expect that she would offer her help. She really liked it, because no one helped her for a long time. He asked me to give him a broom so that he would clean up after himself, because he was very uncomfortable and ashamed for causing harm while he was at her house. Apparently he is just bored of sitting still without doing something, and he wanted to do something. But it turned out that where he used to live, it was customary to work a lot, and if you didn't do anything, it meant that there would be no food for several days. At some point he cut his finger. It was a little unexpected and he got scared at that moment. She immediately asked him if he was okay, but this time he also asked for forgiveness for this for some reason. She begins to notice that he apologizes too often. She wondered why he asked for forgiveness so often and asked for a broom back. She couldn't see how guilty he was, so she tried her best to make him comfortable being around her. Then she asked him to sit down. Apparently, she wanted to talk to him about something. She started examining him because she was worried if he had an infection in his finger. She took out some kind of pharmacy remedy and treated it early. She also constantly asked if it hurt him, to which he replied that everything was fine. He was very sorry that it happened. While they were sitting side by side at the same table, he could not take his eyes off her. He admired her constantly. He thought she was incredibly beautiful. He was a little embarrassed. He thought that because he liked her, he was so often nervous and made mistakes. But he just wants to look good in her eyes. After a while, she finished tending to his wound. And it seems he begins to fall in love with her. He begins to notice that he is very warm with her. And she is his light. Circinia. He thanked her for helping him, to which she asked him to be more careful next time. At some point, the two of them noticed that something was wrong, but what? She saw how he grew noticeably. He became noticeably taller. He said that every night his elbows and knees hurt, which means that this is a sign of growth. She was surprised that in just 3 days he grew so much. Do guys grow up so fast? She thought. She looked after him like a mother. She was worried about whether he ate well and constantly monitored how he felt, controlled whether he ate, walked, and bought. She really enjoyed it. She was happy to see how he grows and promised herself in the future to feed him even more, to which he smiles in response. He asked her if she would be baking bread today, to which she said yes, but first you need to look somewhere. Once it was deep night outside. They were sleeping side by side in the same room, and suddenly she hears that someone is calling for help. She wakes up and hears Ben is saying something. Please help, please. She does not understand what happened because she could not understand what was the matter after she woke up. It turned out that he was lying nearby and asked for help because he had a dream. He then apologized for waking her up. Ben has terrible nightmares every night, which makes it very difficult for him to sleep peacefully. She went up to him and saw that he was shaking all over. Of course, she was very worried about this. She did not know how to solve this problem and how to help him. But she knew she had to do something. She sat next to him to make him feel better. Next to her, he felt safe, and felt that it was much easier for him next to her. She somehow magically does so that he gets better. She tries her best to calm him down and tell him that he is completely safe here. He fell asleep very quickly, and she tried to wake him up, but he did not open his eyes, as if falling into the abyss. He was trembling and crying. All she had to do was warm him up and restore his breath, hoping that he would get enough sleep. She did not leave him for a second because she was very worried about him and wanted him to feel better. She could not understand why it was so hard for him. She suggested that his past was to blame for everything. Maybe because of him he suffers so much every night? This pain will never be understood by ordinary people, and it cannot return him in this state, because if he returns, then his life will again be filled with suffering. But she remembered the money and realized that she really needed it to avoid death. She promised to take care of him while they were together. At some points she enjoyed it. He wakes up and she thought he was having a nightmare again. She was scared for him. She thought maybe it was because of the sweat on his forehead. Maybe it prevents him from sleeping properly. After she started looking at his face, she noticed that it was time to cut his hair. Then he opens his eyes and said her name. She got scared because she thought she was disturbing his sleep and woke him up. She said everything was fine and he could go on sleeping. She just wanted to fix his hair but disturbed his sleep. He told her that he was very pleased when her hands touched his face, thanked him for taking care of him, because thanks to this, he was not afraid to fall asleep at night. But she was worried, because he saw everything, that she looked at him and touched his face, to which he said that he only pretended to be asleep so as not to scare her. He thanked her again for her care, to which she stroked his head and asked him not to worry anymore. It was clear that she likes to take care of him. He was like a native person for her. After that, she left him to sleep and went to rest herself. Morning came, and they both woke up. She nevertheless decided to cut his hair, asked him not to worry, because she would only trim the ends. He was not opposed. But still she decided to ask him if he minds. Maybe he wants to send everything as it is? But he said that he didn't mind, and everything is in order. You can start. At some point, he began to behave strangely and move strangely, to which the girl asked him not to shake his legs because it's better not to joke with scissors. but apparently he didn't control it all. She thought that apparently he had some kind of restless dream. He was very uncomfortable for what was happening to him and asked her not to worry. She was constantly interested in not cutting off a lot of hair once again. She showed him strands so that he would approve of the length of hair that she was going to from the meeting. Everything almost done, she tried to give him a nice hairstyle. It took quite a long time. Well, it was worth it. She told him she was done, and he could look at himself in the mirror. After that, she noticed that he apparently started to have a temperature. Some kind of intense heat comes from him. She was very embarrassed. She did not understand what was going on. All of a sudden, he started behaving strangely again. She asked if he was okay. Well, apparently he was definitely not okay. She grabbed his hand to understand exactly what happened to him. She still couldn't understand what was happening to him, and told him if she ran with a temperature, it would only get worse, to which he replied that his heart was about to jump out of his chest. This scared her even more. She asked him to sit on the floor. She was afraid that he was having a heart attack, and thought that he needed to urgently go to the hospital, asked him to breathe calmly, but he said that it was not worth it. Everything was fine with him. He said he felt good, but she saw that he was lying. Then he asked to shorten his hair a little more. She asked him to stand exactly. After she finished his meetings, she admired him, and considered him very charming. She brought him a mirror and offered to look at herself and asked him what he thought about the new hairstyle, and also told him to answer as honestly as possible, without lying. She asked maybe need more pruning, to which he replied that he wanted to feel the warmth from her hands in his hair forever, so there was no need to cut anything else. But she couldn't get it out of her head. The thought that he had something with his heart. She immediately offered him to eat immediately, to which he offered his help. He constantly dreamed and imagined some situation. It did not give him peace for a minute. He no longer knew how to deal with it. If he only knew what could help him not to think about it, he would have taken advantage of it long ago. Apparently, this situation haunted him that night, and because of this, he felt so bad in the morning. It had something to do with getting someone back, and this curse will last 1 to 2 years. And not necessarily alive, the main thing is to return someone. But when they came to the house, she brought him food so that he could eat properly. After that, several days passed, during which time they did not quarrel, and got along well together. They were comfortable living with each other. But one day she noticed something nasty enough. She didn't think it would happen so quickly. It turned out that all the food in the house was over, and she didn't know what to do with it because she didn't have extra money, and she needed to feed the two of them. She didn't think it would happen so fast, because if she got her money, there wouldn't be such a problem. Because she has no money, she can't afford to buy some more food, but it is not yet known when they will be returned. One can only hope that this will happen as soon as possible. Began to notice that the girl was thinking and worried about something. He realized that she had anxiety for some reason, so he decided to ask what was the matter. Since he didn't want Cercinia to think about any problems, he was ready to help in any way he could. But she was sad at the thought that she could not leave Ben, because if he finds out, he will begin to blame himself. And at some point, she remembered that she had not eaten meat for a long time, so she decided to go to the market to buy some food. When Ben found out that she was planning to go to the market, he immediately wanted to go with her. But for some reason he was refused, because in her opinion it was better for him to stay at home. He tried in every possible way to persuade her. You convinced her that it would be difficult for her to carry the purchases, and he could help her with this, but for a long time he could not convince her. The girl told him that she forbade him to go with her, because it was not the best idea. But it was very hard for her to resist such eyes, because he sincerely wanted to go with her. But there was one problem. The fact is that Cercinia did not have money, and therefore she decided to sell her jewelry in order to buy food with this money. I would not like him to see that she sells them for food out of desperation. But there is one very important point. For a girl, jewelry is not just a decoration, it is a whole ritual. She loved to dress up for any occasion, and she never felt sorry for money for clothes, cosmetics, and jewelry. Every time Cercinia used her jewelry, she could spend hours admiring herself in the mirror, and one can imagine how hard it was for her to say goodbye to them. I had to spend a fortune that her parents left her. But it's not just how lucky she was that she had enough jewelry, even more than she needed. Without it, she would have died of hunger. It is hard to imagine how hard it was for the girl to say goodbye to these jewelry. because for her it was very valuable. In them, Circinia felt incredibly beautiful and attractive. When they started going to the market, Ben said that it was probably dangerous to go alone, but she was more afraid to leave him at home alone. It was clear that her mood had deteriorated a little. The sadness in her eyes was very visible, but she asked Ben to be careful and not to break the plates until she returned. They stood near the door. Ben saw her off, but really did not want to stay at home without her, and hoped that she would still take him to the market with her. After Circinia left the house, Ben shouted her name and said something. He went outside and said that he would be waiting for her, then waved his hand. Since he really liked being near the girl, he could not wait until she returned home, because with her he felt more than ever good, warm, cozy, and safe. And of course for her these words were very pleasant. She liked to hear that someone was waiting for her at home. On the way, she thought about what to take home from food. She thought between beef stew and chicken, but still settled on beef stew. After a while she managed to find a place where she could exchange jewelry for money. Some man was carefully examining her jewelry. It took a long time. Since she needs to buy food for home, it was not a problem for her to wait and finally get at least some money. While she waited for the man to appreciate the ring, she had hopes that she could get at least 200,000. Circinia adored jewelry since her childhood. Therefore, she had quite good taste, and she carefully monitored that they were in good condition, so her jewelry retained its value to this day. She saw that the man had finished inspecting her ring and was looking forward to how much he could give her for him. But it seemed to him that it was not enough in good condition. He said that there was some kind of scratch on it, so he did not offer her a large amount will be able. But this is impossible. All the jewelry was in perfect condition. At home there was no scratch on it. What other scratch? The girl asked. From now on, she started to get a little angry. That man showed her where the scratch is located, because of which he will not be able to offer her a large amount. But it was clear that this scratch was made on purpose, because such a trace cannot be left by accident. It was obvious. But where did she come from? That man said that he could only offer 100,000, which is half as much as he would like. But still, this is very small, and this decoration costs a lot more money. Since it seemed to her that the man made this scratch on purpose in order to pay much less than the cost of this ring, this made her very angry, and she grabbed his hand. He was immediately frightened, and did not understand why she was so angry, because it seemed to him that the price was justified enough and it should have arranged it. He asked to let go of his hand. Well, since she had the power of fire, he felt that something was hot in his hand, and some piece of iron fell out of his sleeve. Apparently she achieved this, since it was expected that that man deliberately ruined her ring with this piece of iron, and now it became definitely obvious that he was deceiving her. But he tried his best to divert suspicion from himself, said that it was to remove the wrapper, and he had nothing to do with it. Her ring was damaged before she came to him. Of course, it all looked very implausible, and at some point she caught her eye a ring that was lying on a display case nearby. And what did she decide to do? I was wondering, is this really the piece of iron with which the man scratched her ring? So without thinking twice, she took that ring from the window and began to scratch it, and check whether there would be the same trace as on her ring. At this time, the man shouted and said that it cost a lot of money. Of course, he was in a panic. The first thing he was afraid of was that the very expensive ring was now ruined, and the second was that she declassified it. It became clear to her that the scratch looked like 1-to-1 to the one that was on her ring. After that, she managed to prove that he had deceived her, and it immediately became clear that he just wanted to earn extra money. But that was not the case. He said that he would give no more than 103,000 for the ring. This angered her even more, because he did not admit his guilt, and moreover, he wants to pay such small money for her ring. She is already tired of proving that she demands more money for such an incredible, worthwhile piece of jewelry. After all, it should cost at least 500,000, but this amount surprised the man very much. He would never have given such a huge amount of money. He tried to free her because she was not herself, that she was crazy and demanded much more money than this ring actually costs. He did not understand where she got such a sum from. Apparently she does not understand the price of jewelry, he thought. To this, the girl told him that he himself would see what would happen next, because despite her appearance, She is not as simple as it might seem to him. After that, for some reason, he apologized and offered 200,000. But it was somehow strange. Why could he change his mind so abruptly and increase the cost twice from the one he could give before? But now she demands no less than 500,000. He struggled to negotiate a smaller amount, first offered 300, then 400, and realized that he might not even count on 100,000 because she decided that she would not give this ring for less than 500. But Circinia insisted on her own, and in no way wanted to reduce the cost. It was clear that the man would give up a little more and pay the amount that she told him. He no longer knew what to do, after all. He not only ruined the ring, but he would pay much more than it cost in the form in which it was originally when she brought it to him. It turns out that he remains in a huge minus, and he didn't make any money from it. As a result, he gave her 500,000, and the girl got what she wanted. She achieved that she received the money for her ring, for which she was not opposed to saying goodbye to her jewelry, and she did it great. After that, Circinia came to the market, where she could afford to buy everything she needed, could not save, did not deny herself anything, and chose those products that were the freshest and highest quality. She enjoyed walking around the market and choosing products for the house, because she initially counted on a very small amount. But now she does not need to worry about money. She managed to buy more than she was going to. If she had known that it would be, she would have taken Ben with her. Circinia thought it would be nice to go with him next time. But will there be a next time? Because Ben will leave in just a couple of days, and they can stay together a little more. It even seemed to her that fate brought them together. But the girl decided not to cheat herself, and remembered that she just needed money. But what happened after that alarmed her a little. She heard someone asking passers-by if they had seen a girl with red and long hair. They began to explain that this girl walks with a young man and is of such height, but passers-by said that they had not seen anyone. But since Circinia is the only girl with red hair in the Empire, she was very easy to spot. This guy didn't exchange money then. Why is he looking like that? And apparently the fact that he is looking for a girl will not lead to anything good. Perhaps he pursues the goal of destroying her, and that is how he could take revenge on her. And at that moment she decides that she needs to get rid of him first. But at this time, Ben is at home all alone, and if suddenly they find him, what can be expected from them? It is better not to allow this, because he might be in danger. Ben has had a strange feeling in his chest for a long time. When the heart does not touch him, his heart starts beating very strongly. It becomes kind of crazy. Any touch of her makes him nervous, and at the same time it is something pleasant for him. If he wants to stay, he will become a person who will complicate her life. She will have to constantly look after him and provide for him. This is his very scarecrow. As much as he does not want to stay, he understands that she may not want this. Despite his origin, he received warmth and care, and this was absolutely enough for him. At first glance, Circinia seems cold and inaccessible, but in fact, if you get to know her better, you can see how affectionate and kind she is. Ben was called by his name for the first time. It was a special moment in his life for him. And the fact that it was she who came up with this name, he especially liked it. Every time he had to see her, he could not believe that he lived with such a charming girl. He could not stop looking at her. Every night he remembered what they did with her during the day. He remembered her every word and actions towards him. It was very valuable for him. He really liked the way every part of her body looks and how charming her voice is, which drives him crazy. But at some point he caught himself thinking about her now, and what thoughts come to his mind. He felt a little ashamed. But for some reason he cannot admit to himself that he liked her, and he would not be able to continue to live without her. He thought he was already completely crazy, because she helped him at one time, and how he allows himself to think about such things. He should not count on anything, says Ben. After that he wanted to go outside and get some fresh air. But even on the street he could not sit idle. He found something to do. It was the laundry that needed to be washed and put things in order at home. He did this not because the girl asked him, but because he was not used to sitting idle and just relax. Of course, what he does is doing laundry. This is a very good and useful thing, but he would also like to learn how to cook, and after that he would be 100% satisfied with himself, and didn't feel awkward when Circinia was doing household chores and he didn't help her. If she learned to cook, he could please the girl with delicious food every day, which he would cook with pleasure for her, so that she would feel that he wants to take care of her. He hears Circinia calling him. She ran home very quickly and wanted to know if he was all right, because that guy could get to their house faster than her and hurt Ben, or else take him back. She immediately started asking if anyone came to their house. He said that there was no one. She need not worry. After that, it became much easier for her. He wondered what had happened and why she was so worried. Apparently, the girl didn't want to tell Ben what the real problem is and who she saw today. And so she lied to him a little, said that everything was in order. She was just afraid that Ben might break the plates again. He did not understand why this is so important to her and why she is so worried because of this, because this is not a reason to worry so much. After that, she was wondering what he was doing at home while she was at the market and buying products. He told her that he was waiting for her, and at that time, he was doing laundry. Circinia touched his head, and he thought she could feel his heartbeat, but instead, he just heard what a great guy he is. Then he offered to bring all the purchases home so that the girl would not carry such heavy packages. But for a second, he did not stop thinking about how they could become closer with her, and thought that over time this desire would disappear, because perhaps this is not normal, as it seemed to him. At this time, the guy who was looking for a girl returned to his boss and began to tell everything he knows. Since he did not find her, this did not make his boss very happy. For him, it was expected. They talked about the need to immediately prepare money for Circinia, because in 3 days she should come and bring a slave. We need to deal with this immediately. To which the assistant asked the boss, "Is he ready to pay the girl that kind of money?" To which the boss said that they can't just leave everything as it is, and in any case, you need to give all the money before returning the pledge, namely the slave Ben. They decided that first, they need to find out where she lives and get a pledge, to which the assistant asked what it was for. But it turned out they wanted to destroy her and return all the money after they find where her house is. The guy didn't expect to hear such information because the boss's plan turned out to be very cruel. He said that he would do everything as he was ordered. At this time, Circinia and Ben are having dinner at home. She cooked a lot of delicious food and they sat down at the table. There was a lot of meat, and finally there were no problems with food. Everything was very tasty. They didn't even have time to talk. He was pleased to see the girl enjoying delicious food. But she noticed something. Apparently something didn't go according to plan. She began to notice that Ben began to behave like a teenager in love. She began to dislike this. But he doesn't know it yet because he can't control his views on her. He constantly offered her food. She didn't even have time to swallow the food. She begins to look at him with suspicion, does not understand what is happening. Because of this, even the fork accidentally fell to the floor. He got worried and asked if the girl was okay, then ran to get a new fork. Circinia, she thanked him, and could not understand what was happening to her. When suddenly she caught herself thinking that she likes muscular guys. And no matter how attractive he is, his body is quite thin and looks painful. He seemed beautiful to her, but she did not know how to behave in this situation. At this time brought a second fork so that she continued to eat food. But she got up from the table and decided to leave. It seemed to her that she was completely crazy. He began to apologize and it made her more and more angry, so she asked him not to react like that. The girl offered him to eat all the meat while she went to her room. Since it was time for him to go anyway, Circinia tried not to think that there might be something between them. A few hours later, a dark night fell on the street. But she couldn't sleep at all, because all sorts of thoughts climbed into her head. She thought it was very stupid, and because of this, she cannot sleep. After all, this is just a long-term attachment. It leads to love, and that's why it fills the whole head. At home, he is like a little brother. He is very sorry. It was hard to stop feeling sorry for him, because she was so used to caring for him and looking after him like a younger brother or a child. If the story starts, she won't be able to become the heroine of her own free will, and that will be bad for Ben. So it's best to just exchange money for Ben in 3 days, and forget about it all. Therefore, you need to quickly get rid of the image of the villainess. Every day it is harder for them to realize that soon Ben will have to go back because they are already quite used to being together. And if a girl can get away from him, it will be easier for him to leave, so she should get into it. But when she remembers what kind of life he can return to if they part, she becomes very sorry for him. Used to being together, if a girl can move away from him, it will be easier for him to leave. so it is important to do this. But when she remembers what kind of life he can return if I stay, and becomes very sorry. After all, if he returns to the casino, he may again fall into slavery. Of course she wants to help him somehow. While they were washing the dishes, she asked where his family was. To which he said that his mother died when he was 13 years old. And from that moment he fell into slavery. He had to get used to those conditions from childhood. It was incredibly hard for her to imagine what he went through for so many years of being a slave. It's amazing that he remained such a kind person. But many years have passed and he got used to it. He was always very lonely, and the first woman to say a word to him was she, Circinia. Perhaps because of this, he became so attached to her and appreciated her every touch and warmth. But something did not give her peace of mind. She constantly thought about it. That she can't stay with him, because if the plot goes against her, she will be killed, even if he is not guilty of anything. And since she's into this business, she's going to be alone, as much as she hates to let Ben go. They really had a great time. They would make a good couple. He offered her to wash the dishes so she could rest. But since she had to draw a line between them, she said that these are her things, and she can handle everything herself. He agreed and waited for her to do her business. As hard as it was for them, they tried to accept the fact that soon they would have to live separately, and they might never see each other again. As time went by so fast, the day came when Ben had to leave. He packed his things and was ready to leave. Circinia hoped he would understand that she couldn't leave him, because he smiles as if everything is in order, and at this time her heart is pounding very hard. She was hurt by the mere thought that he would soon leave. He said that it was time for him. Since the sun had already set, it was time to leave. But it was very hard for her to realize that this is the last time she sees him, and he is sent back to be a slave for someone. He reminded them that it was time for them to go, took her by the hand, and they went to their destination. At that time, they were already waiting for them. That man in his office. He couldn't figure out what to do with her in this situation. He thought that she might not change her mind and be quite unpredictable. They received a letter from him where it was written that he was looking forward to their presence and the day of the meeting. But no one knew how this meeting would end. They have already waited for Circinia and Ben. Already the sun is setting and they are still not there. He started yelling at his assistant and asking why they are not here yet, when suddenly he heard someone's steps and realized that they were already in place. Finally, they enter the office, and the decisive moment has come. He said that if they need money, then they were late. They need to double-check everything, and asked them to take off their raincoat. She obeyed him and began to show her face. He didn't expect to see how pretty she is. He did not stop admiring her for several minutes, and considered that he was very brave, since he forced her to take off her cloak and show her face. Then he asked to hand over the bail, that is Ben. But she did not let him go and held his hand behind her. They noticed that Ben gained a little weight, pumped up, changed his hairstyle, and in general began to look better. It was noticeable that he was pleased when he was around a girl. At this time, Circinia seemed to feel that not everything was as good as it might seem at first glance, that you were alarming her. Because for them, Ben is just a pledge. Maybe it would be better for him to stay with her next to her? While he was next to her, he felt that he was completely safe, and in which case she would be able to protect him. But just thinking that this was their last meeting made her very sad. That man tried his best to convince you not to be afraid to give Ben away. Everything is going according to plan. He said that you don't have to worry about this, because excellent conditions await him. But she saw in what conditions they kept him before. It was obvious that he was blatantly lying. He kept talking about how they would take good care of him, and he would be happy there. Girls asked when Ben should go to the Count, to which the man was surprised that he already had a name, and replied that he would have it tomorrow morning. After all, the Count's palace was really much better than what it was before. Sometime later, a suitcase was brought to the girl so that she could check that there are 30 million. She looked at the money. At that time, they ordered to take the slave. He let go of her hand and began to walk away. It was very hard for her to watch what was happening. And of course, he was also unhappy that he would never see her again, and went to where he would be a slave forever. At that moment, she remembered how they lived with him all this time. But suddenly she was offered to take the check. This made her very angry, and she suspected that she was obviously being followed. But that man did not understand what she meant. At least he pretended to. She was outraged that they were capable of such a thing. But this time she decided to forgive them for this. But if this happens again, she will not just leave it. After that, she only had to leave her signature on one document. They brought her a piece of paper and asked her to sign. But she felt something was wrong. While she put her signature, she felt Ben's hands getting colder as if no one was holding them. Then she took her suitcase and left with the money, because she decided that it would be as it would be. But it turned out you were the promises that the man made. He did not keep, and did not decide to interrogate Ben, and everything that he can know about the girl. They continue to allow themselves to treat him like a slave. They threw him face down on the ground, and demands to know what powers Circinia possesses. They treated them so badly like he was some kind of animal and not a human. His whole face was already scratched. Blood was flowing, and he could hardly restrain himself to endure these torments and disrespect for him. At some point, he rolled his eyes, and this made the boss very angry, and he began to blackmail that, if he did not tell him some information, he would do something to him. At that time, he recalled how good it was for him with the girl at her house. He felt like a person who is needed by someone and who is taken care of by someone. After that, they tied his hands and forced him to lie face down in some room. It is impossible to express how much he wanted to return to a place where he feels safe and respectful, and he has freedom of action and speech. They are trying to prove to him that she simply exchanged him for money and took him as a pledge and nothing more. But they did not know how well they became friends and how good it was for them to be together. He asked them not to touch Circinia, but they laughed at him and believed that with his hands tied he would still do nothing, and who is she for them to touch her? Although he was also surprised by her beauty and believed that she had some kind of unique character and something unusual. He felt very uncomfortable being there after he visited the girl's house, even though he was used to being a slave before. But because he learned how to live in normal conditions, he was disgusted to be here again. Turns out they already found the girl and that chief ordered to show her. He tried in every possible way to shout to her so that she would see in what conditions they are holding him and how they are mocking him, because if she saw this, she would definitely protect him. But he did not understand why this slave allows himself so much and why he clung to that girl so much. Whereupon they decided to take Ben to the slums to wait there, where no one could hear or see him. He shouted very loudly not to touch her, otherwise he would destroy them, and threatened that they would not dare to touch her. He sat in a dark room, and hoped that at least some kind of salvation awaited him, and the girl would remain alive and safe and sound. While Circinia was at home, she hoped that everything was fine with him, and because of these thoughts, she could not find a place for herself. She was very worried about him. It was already evening. She was lying on her bed. She even forgot to change because of thoughts about him. She still thought that she had been deceived, and they were keeping him in terrible conditions. But she was not mistaken. Everything was so. It seemed to her that a little more and she would go crazy. But then she managed to understand that it's better not to stand still and start moving, and then the thoughts will go away by themselves. You just need to distract yourself. While the girl could not find a place for herself and walked around the house, every section of her rooms reminded that they had stood there with Ben recently and could talk about something. It seemed to her that he was standing nearby, and at the same time she was surprised that she was actually a witch. He was excited about it, but it was terrifying to see and hear for her. After that, she realized that it was some kind of hallucination and she really should rest. Of course, it was necessary to recover as quickly as possible. Already voice hallucinations are starting. This can go too far and be very serious with a mental state problem in the future. Even the table in the kitchen reminded her of him. She could not look at everything around her normally because she was haunted by hallucinations. And over time, this began to frighten her very much because she could not exist normally and live as before. After which she made a very important decision for herself. She must return Benchev no matter what it costs her. Even if she would have been destroyed for this later, or pierced with arrows, she still decided on it, and is obliged to return it. But then she thought about whether he was well near the Count, and maybe you shouldn't. It seemed to her that the best solution would be to return all the money, because the main thing is that everyone will remain alive, and no money is worth such torment. At the time when she decided to leave home, she heard someone say something to her. It turned out to be them, but she did not understand how they ended up at her house, and why they came here. To which they told her whether to greet the guests. It seemed to them that she was not happy with them, and apparently not in vain. because they obviously didn't come to her with good news. But she still did not understand why they came to her. After all, they had already completed their deal, and no one else owes them anything anymore. She immediately realized that something was planned against her, but so far she could not understand what exactly. Then I asked them where they were going. They somehow knew that she was going for a slave, and they asked if she was not going to them, after which she began to ask, "Where is Ben, and if everything is all right with him?" It was the only thing that bothered her. They started talking to her as if she was visiting them. It was clear that they were not in the mood for a nice conversation. They threatened that if she wanted to know the debt, the guests should be treated accordingly, and without their help, she will not find him. After that, the girl said that she could give all the money just to get Ben back to her. But they did not understand why she was worried about this pathetic slave. After which he said a very strange phrase. He hinted that people were looking for their kind, that is, that she was also a slave, or would become one. She did not immediately understand what it meant, but it still angered her, and she realized that something was wrong here. But they didn't know from the very beginning that she had a superpower, and also that she was a witch. Since they didn't take that into account, they thought that they could easily destroy her, and were immediately frightened, because they immediately understood what had happened, and that he had not just seen in front of them. Some of them realized that this is possible, and there are all the countries of ability that their assistant spoke about. After that, they decided that they had no other choice left, and they needed to destroy it immediately. They attacked her with swords, hoping it would save them. Well, how wrong they were. They still did not know who they were dealing with. She immediately began to defend herself, and let them know that they were not expected here. She managed to scare them away well, to her house, in the hope that they could get what they wanted and destroy her. They were very scared and asked to stop. After that, they realized that she was not an easy girl, and it was better not to mess with her. But they tried to scare her away, and they made it clear that it's better not to touch them, since only they know where Ben is. At that time, it was as if someone prompted her and said behind her back that, if she wants him to die, it is necessary to make sure that this shameless tongue can no longer speak me in such terrible things. This voice asked that she properly take revenge on them. But she tried to keep her sanity, because in such situations you cannot act carelessly. Still, she needs to find Ben, despite how much she wants to do to them the same thing that they wanted to do to her. This made it clear to that boss that she really needed Ben, and she was ready to do anything as long as he was safe and in good conditions. After that, they told her that when they beat him, he thought only of her, although at the same time they promised that no one would beat him and harm him. She understood that she could no longer stand it and wanted to see him, but did not yet understand how she would succeed. When suddenly she gathered herself and realized what she was capable of and what she should do next. And by this, she achieved the fact that they began to fear her and not consider her some stupid girl who could not do anything to them in response.